Hey guys, this is Matt and Brian doing a weird video blog thingy. We both feel really awkward in front of a camera. This is like the 25th take, but we're going to try with this one. This is going to be it.
Yeah.
We took some questions from you about lore and rules, and we're going to take a couple minutes, try and keep this under like 6 minutes, and answer them.
So we're going to start off, and I'm going to ask Matt, who are the leaders of each faction, and what is their sort of backstory?
So in Ashes we have what I've been calling 3.5 factions. And I'll start with the 0.5 faction, which is called Rise to Tyr. Their country has been completely wiped out by the Devouring, so they have the option of starting in Rise to Tyr, and they aren't their own faction. They can join any other faction, but they come from this one starting area. The leader of Rise to Tyr is King Gesser Satiri. They're a royal monarchy. Well, quite recently in this age, they were disparate nomadic tribes. Their Bloodhand was a foreigner. He arrived in the north and began conquering the tribes. And when he would conquer them, he would dip his hand in the blood of his enemies and then press his hand over their banner to mark it as his. And at this point, he's conquered almost the entire north. He's led a horde of barbarians down into the ruins of Vedicia, where they've established a camp to enter into the Devouring. The Bloodhand did take his first expeditionary force in, and has not been heard of for 3 years. One of the things Luzgrad is going to want to resolve is whether or not he's dead. Brian, feel free to jump in and ask me questions at any time.
I will.
But in the meantime, I will keep going.
Matt, tell me about Thera.
Thera?
Yeah.
Oh, well, your favorite?
My favorite.
The leader of Thera is Father Commander Lucius the Great.
God, I could have sworn it was me.
If you're interested in finding out why Lucius the Great is called the Father Commander, you can join the forums, and in the private Thera forum, if you're available to, if you're a faction member, it explains their ranking system, why they call each other Brother Knight or Father Commander in this case. The background of Lucius is that he was once one of the bodyguards of King Gesser. About 10 years ago, for reasons unknown, Gesser cut his tongue out. Lucius the Grey, perhaps not handling this very well, gathered a contingent of knights, rode east into what was at the time a province of Rise to Tyr called Thera. They couped the local lords, declared it a theocracy under a religion that had existed but only as wandering priests, is now the sole religion of this region, in which they've been preparing for a coming battle against a malevolent deity that they believe in. The last faction is the Democracy of Harmor. Their faction leader is President Avery Osprey. At this time, he is the only faction leader that is known to still exist in his home country. All the other ones are somewhere in the Devouring, alive or dead. He is quite old, nearing 80 years. He's been the extremely charismatic leader of the United Islands Party for most of his life. In his young years, he was a Navy war hero, protecting Harmor from Rise to Tyr aggression. They wanted to claim it as another province for them, and he led boats that kept them from being able to land on their islands.
So we've got the three factions, and we know that players will be selecting among them, or I guess 3.5, and selecting among them. Are we worried that we're going to see imbalanced numbers, with some factions being larger or smaller, and do we have a plan to handle that?
I think one of the advantages we have right now is that we've managed to keep all the factions roughly equally cool. So we're seeing little fluctuations where some are getting higher than others. In the beginning, Luzgrad was the underdog, and then just recently we've seen them surged up to be close to the most possible. I think right now they might have the most people. So we're probably going to see that over the years. Factions will, depending on the popularity, will go up and down. They should remain. We were expecting them to remain pretty close, and we don't think we're going to have to step in at any point. It probably should balance itself out roughly. And I have a couple things in case there's a clear underdog that needs help. I don't really want to say what they are. We're just going to sort of roll them out naturally in game, and I don't think people will even really notice we're manipulating things. It's just going to seem like things are getting balanced in a way.
Okay. So you mentioned that the Blood Hand conquered the north, and then he moved south to set up a base camp, and then went into the Devouring.
That's right.
Have the other factions set up similar camps, or has everybody moved in, or are people staying home?
So what has happened is all the factions 3 years ago sent in what's called the first expedition. These were armies gathered of all the people that may have known what was going on with this devouring, all the skilled warriors, anyone knowledgeable and skilled went in. They haven't come back. The players have formed what's called the second expedition 3 years later, in the present of our game starting. These people are unskilled. They've gone into Devouring at the point that our game starts, and they've set up base camps. This is in what they expect to be the region of the capital of Rise Satir, but mysteriously there aren't any buildings here. It seems to be unconquered forest. At our game site, we're going to have a separation between the base camps and what we're calling the forward camps. Actually, at game, we're going to have the forward camps, and that's going to be composed of just the PCs at game. And we're assuming that off-site there is a base camp with about 2 NPCs doing like supply stuff, just the background helping people that are like supporting the PCs that are on the field in the vanguard.
So it's like 2 NPCs unofficially for every one PC.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
And as we have new players join the game, there are going to be these NPCs that have, finally got enough training or
mustered,
learned.
yeah.
They've gotten mustered, and now they're joining into the main faction to help the fight.
Okay. So I think this is a pretty good summary of that sort of things. Another question people were wondering about is, in the setting, is there like the traditional boogeyman? Is there these common cultural evils?
One of the things we see throughout the game, and it's going to be a theme we see throughout the first year, is that all the factions share a fear of death. Resurrection is something we have in the game, but at this point it only exists within the Devouring. Up to this point in history, when you died, you stayed dead.
What a novel idea.
Does that happen in LARP?
I don't even know. Yeah.
The people resurrecting inside the Devouring is going to be a new thing. In this fear of death manifests as a boogeyman per se, and it does it a little bit differently depending on which culture you're from. Harmor and Rise Satir share one, which they refer to as death. Death is part of the religion called the Trinity of Fates. They believe in the heavens, the earth, and death. Heavens and earth make life form between them, and death is what happens afterward. When you die, you pass on, and it eats you. It's sort of a scientific religion in that way, where it's like a rational understanding of metaphysics. So it's like scientists believe these things exist. They don't worship them in any way. They just sort of analyze them and understand them. In Thera, they believe there is only one God, and they oppose him. They refer to him as He Who Eats Time, not his actual name. The actual name is a closely guarded secret of the clergy, because they think saying his name is sort of dangerous. They treat this thing as sentient and as a direct enemy. They're not fighting a god because they think they can win, because they have to, as far as they're concerned.
So is every death that happens his direct interference then? So like little Timmy falls down the well and dies outside, and that was him? Or does death still a natural aspect for the Thera?
Thera wouldn't blame minor accidents on He Who Eats Time. They think it's a much greater agency that's been going on. They believed in him for a long time. They think that the Devouring is a direct manifestation of him, but even before that, he was killing key people in order to sort of create his mysterious plan that will end in all life being consumed by him.
It looks like it's getting there, too.
If they're correct that the Devouring is a manifestation of him, he's getting pretty close to successful.
Okay. So we've heard about the rational scientists, the religious. Let's talk about the tribal primitive. Yeah. What do we got there?
In Lusgrad, since they're a more split up culture, they sort of have 2 that fit this role. It's sort of the same thing, but in some tribes it's called Crow. In other tribes they call it the Wild Hunt. What it is earthbound spirits And this is they're the exception where both the other ones think that the evil is coming from an outside realm. Luzgrad tends to think of it as something that is already here, hiding basically in the shadows. They believe it manifests as skeletal figures, sort of like a Wendigo type starving figure, and they always have animal skulls for heads. In the case of people that refer to it as crow, think he has a bird skull. Also, you see like caribou skulls. We're pulling out a lot of lore you might have seen in other places there with the Wild Hunt looking like these undead sort of figures coming out of the woods.
So the Wild Hunt or the Crow then, is this a force to be opposed, or is this just a natural part of life? Like that's it, you live, and then one day the Wild Hunt runs you down.
This is definitely more of a boogeyman story. Okay. In their case. They think that if you transgress culturally, this will show up and kill you for it.
Okay.
And they have stories of like somebody not following the rules of their clan, and then they wander off, and the Wild Hunt shows up and kills them for what they did wrong.
Okay, so we know that, or I know that there's a very extensive write-up on the lore and whatnot, and that the world itself is actually quite fleshed out. So, in looking at some of these further details, the questions come up: is there a major source of knowledge in this setting?
Yeah, a lot of the knowledge in this world was concentrated in the capital city of Rise Satir called Rise. It featured massive libraries set in huge white marble towers. And as I mentioned before, King Gesser was gathering all the scholars, all the arcanists in the world, and putting them to work here to study and continue their arts. The devouring centered on this location and spread outward. So in the first day that this cataclysm happened, most of the world's knowledge was lost inside. As this is expanded, the chances of being able to recover the books and people lost inside there grows dimmer and dimmer. So if the second expedition isn't able to end or reverse the devouring in some way, the world may have lost most of its knowledge. This can be historically compared to the fall of Rome or the burning of the libraries in Alexandria.
Okay, so last thing we're going to talk about for this sort of setting details. I know some games like to dabble in certain languages, and I think you've chosen that we're going to stick to one language because it's easier that way. But that said, are there going to be specific slangs or profanities that are going to fit the setting, and are they going to be culturally based?
You know, I haven't come up with anything yet myself. If players want to come up with this stuff, I totally encourage you to just go wild with whatever you can come up with. If it sticks in your faction, I will end up making it canon. Interesting point on the languages. I haven't decided other languages mean anything specific in game. If you happen to speak French or German or whatever, feel free to speak it. There are lots of old languages in the world that exist since before the First Age that some people might still know. English is the primary language in this continent. And one of the things I've been putting in a couple spots is that Latin is sort of an old language of knowledge, sort of like we treat it as like it's like a
scholarly
language. It's a similar thing in this world. We're just going to treat the language in this game as it's English is called English, German is called German. Don't worry about where they came from.
Okay, so we've done a lot about the setting and stuff, and that's great, but I like rules. So let's talk about a little bit about the rules and maybe a little bit of game philosophy here. One of the things that's come up is that I think people have realized that the game enjoys a very technical, very precise combat that actually is very intense. So the question has come up, what kind of things can people who are not heavy fighters and are a little bit more inclined to roleplay and non-combatant roles, what can they look forward to participating in?
Yeah, that's something I've heard quite a bit is that the rulebook is 90% combat, and I think that's sort of a inevitability of writing rules. I'm not writing rules for what non-combatants can or can't do. There's a little bit, but I'm mostly leaving it up to them to be creative. I don't think I need to tell you what the rules are for your role-playing and how you like to entertain yourselves on your own. A lot of that's going to come out in how we design the game to create opportunities for you to role-play. One of those big things is, because we have 3 factions, people that like to negotiate and cut deals are going to have an incredible amount of stuff to do, really trying to weave deals in between each other. there is going to be an in-game economy based around the limited resources. And I think we're going to see some really cutthroat dealings between some of these pieces. To get the skill books, for instance, there's going to be particular items you need to get, and I'm going to be releasing a limited number of these every event. So if you want a particular type of skill, you might have to find somebody that has that and then find out what they want to get it from them. Or kill them. Killing them works too.
I mean, if you're the fighty.
Yeah.
How is it going to tie in? Because I know we've talked a lot about faction benefits, and I know the proposed rules on that include a lot of RP related ways to generate faction benefits. So.
We have what we're calling morale points, and these are going to be controlled by the faction leader, but created by the roleplay side of things. One of the really easy ways to produce these at game is actually going to be doing things like playing music, role-playing. If you just want to sit down in your camp and make armor, it will actually give morale points to your faction that could help them directly. And additionally, dressing it up and decorating your camp is going to give you a whole bunch of being in camp. You're going to get 1 point for every period tent, 1 point for a banner, and if you do any other, like if you're from Lusgrad and you want to put a bunch of fake skulls around the perimeter, I will rain points upon you.
All right, so I think we've established that there's definitely going to be some things to do outside of the combat. So another thing people are wondering is the skills are the meat of your character, and that's your character development is getting new skills. But how do we start that? Do we start with skills? How do we get our first skills?
The first time you show up to game, you're going to have a journal, and in that journal is going to be the first page of the skill tree that you've chosen. If you've gone through the character backstory, it's asked you to pick your preferred hero, and each hero is connected to a particular skill tree. So the one you pick is going to give you your first page. The first tier of any skill tree is intended to be learned within a couple hours. So your first Friday night, you will be able to learn your first skill. And that's so when you walk in, basically all you know how to do is swing your weapon. Very quickly you're going to learn your first little trick. Well, it happens to be one of the most deadly skills in the game.
The most powerful skill in the game.
Yeah. You'll learn your first one quickly. And then you'll have to start finding the additional skill pages to learn new skills.
Okay, so we find these skill pages, and they're available to us, and that's how we learn the skills. What is the actual process for learning these skills then? So say I have this new page in my book. What do I see, and what do I do?
So what you'll see on the page is it's going to give you the name of the skill, give you a little bit of description about the hero, and what there's 3 tiers in every skill tree. And the tiers are if you learn all 3, you're going to get a little snippet of his birth, his path through life, and then his death at the end. On that page, it's going to give you a couple of requirements, and it's going to include things like go on a PvE mod through the portal, wound somebody near they're called they're called PvP hotspots in my game design terms. There's a more in-game term that's going to be in there. I think it might be an echo point or something like that. It's basically going to be a spot where something has appeared that the factions are going to want, and they'll be fighting over it.
Get your PvP kill.
Those are going to be the primary things you need to complete for the combat skills. In the case of non-combat skills, we're obviously not going to make somebody that wants to learn how to bandage fight to learn how to bandage. In those cases, those actually can be learned in your camp. The bandaging, for instance, the first tier, you're just actually going to just demonstrate that you sort of have learned and practiced how to do bandaging. And then the higher tier skills will require you to do things like bandage people in the midst of combat or bandage people a whole bunch of times.
All right, so let's get into a couple questions about specific rule stuff. One of the things that comes up is people ask, can I grab weapons, can I hook weapons, and what levels of physical contact are we looking at?
As far as physical contact, you can't ever touch someone body to body unless you ask them first. So Brian falls in combat. Even though me and him are on really good terms, we know each other, I have to say, can I grab you before I grab one of the shoulders and start carrying him away. Likewise, you can as long as somebody directly consents to you touching them, you can touch them in whatever way you guys are okay with. Like if you want to shove someone, you say, "Can I shove you first?" And just do it really quick, quietly, so you're try not to break immersion with it, and that's okay. As far as grabbing weapons, absolutely not, just because it's not safe, and the insurance company would hire an assassin on me. Weapon to weapon contact though is totally okay. If you have an axe, you can bring that axe up to someone's sword and push it out of the way and basically keep their weapon held to the side while your friend pummels them. That's totally okay. So, in summary, you touching their weapon, no. Your weapon touching their weapon, okay.
All right. So we talked about consent for like physical contact and carrying. So how does that fall into the whole described actions and counted actions?
In our game, there are no counted out actions and no described actions. If it's something that we can't physically rep, like say there's a down person and I just want to cut their head off. We're just not going to do that in this game because it's completely immersion breaking as far as I'm concerned. So
instead of counted actions, you're going to perform actions which you're able to do.
Yeah.
And if you're not, there's no real reason for you to do that.
Yeah, we're just going to avoid it if you can't do it because everything in this game happens in game. I've gone out of my way to make it so that a PC at no point is ever going to put their hand on their head and walk away unless there was a safety emergency.
Well, what if somebody dies then?
In the case of somebody dying, it remains an entirely in-game process. If you die, you're going to stay on the ground for a minute, and after a minute, the Devouring raises you up as a zombie. You won't be able to speak or attack or really take any actions. The only thing you can do is pick up your gear and start wandering around looking for the GM to resurrect you. And it's recommended you probably want to walk over to your camp and sort of wait on the outskirts so you res in a safe spot and don't get killed again immediately. The thing is in this game is, everyone's going to die fairly frequently, and we're making it not that big of a deal. It's more of a loss of time than a threat to your character, as long as you play it safe. So if you die, for the next hour your spirit's weak, and if you die again in that hour, it's a 50-50 chance you stay dead. So you have the choice of staying in your camp or maybe doing an NPC shift and playing it safe for that hour. But when something goes down and your friends need your help, you got to make the choice of, do you risk your life to save them, or do you sit this one out and hope they're okay? The hour and the timing of the way the mods in this game, it's going to be a significant loss of XP and possibly loot as well.
Okay. So one of the big things that I know we've been kind of working on and toying with is armor requirements. Our player base thus far is pretty solidly people with current LARP experience, the people who are currently playing games. And I know our armor system is drastically different from a lot of those that are featured. So the question is, what exactly are we going with, and how is that going to work with people's existing equipment?
Yeah. So if you had a look at the rulebook, you would have seen that armor is locational. Your arms are each a sub-location, torso location, and your legs together form one location. And armor is tracked separately on each one. To get armor on your torso, you need majority coverage on the front. And then arms and legs are one that's going to be a little tricky for a lot of people. You need something on your forearm and something on your upper arm. There's no coverage requirement per se. My rules is as long as it looks good, you'll be okay. But there has to be something doing some coverage, some protection here, and something doing some protection here. So bracer and pauldron is fine.
So we do not need to cover elbows.
Don't need to cover elbows.
Similarly, we don't have to cover knees.
That's correct.
That's great.
In the case of legs, I think what we're going to see is a lot of like war skirt style things. In the case of if you have a leather piece and a plate piece, for instance, we're actually going to give you the better piece of what you're wearing. So you can do a simple leather piece to cover your upper area, and then wear the plate piece you might already have on your lower leg or your plate bracer and get the protection of that.
So that should make it pretty easy for people to convert their existing kit over to fit our rule system then.
We hope so.
All right. That is actually the majority of the questions. I think this video's gone long enough, so we're going to call it there.
In fact, way much longer than we expected.
Yeah,
might break this down to a couple pieces.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us for questions. If you have more questions, continue to post them, and if we get enough, we'll do another cool segment, or maybe like a work in progress, but hopefully you guys should be looking forward to hearing with us soon.